Hi, this is Don McAllister and welcome to another edition of Screencasts Online. Well, if all goes to plan, this episode will be published on the same day as macOS High Sierra is formally released to the public. macOS High Sierra, or macOS 10.13, is Apple's latest operating system for the Mac. In fairness, it's not high on feature count, but Apple have been focusing on improving performance and stability in this release. In this week's recent tip video, I covered getting your Mac ready for the upgrade, and this involved giving your Mac a clean out as well as taking a full bootable backup. For most cases, I'm going to assume that you followed these instructions, that your Mac is compatible with macOS High Sierra, and that you've upgraded your Mac via the Mac App Store. So let's get started by taking a look at some of the changes with macOS High Sierra.